All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to trace one single powerful idea through about 200 years of thinking. It's this beautiful concept that what is beautiful is also true, and what's true is also real. But we're going to watch as that whole idea completely falls apart. And it all starts right here with probably one of the most famous lines in all of English poetry from John Keats. This line just perfectly captures this incredible, powerful belief that art and beauty and some deep, fundamental truth are all connected. It's a really comforting, solid way to see the world, where everything just fits together. But, and this is the big question for our whole explainer today, what if that's just not true anymore? What happens when that solid foundation starts to get some cracks? When that single thread connecting beauty and language and reality starts to, well, fray? This is the story of that very unraveling. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with that perfect romantic ideal. Then we'll see how language itself starts to become a real problem. From there, three thinkers, we're talking Derrida, Foucault, and Baudrillard, are going to come in and just blow this whole thing apart piece by piece. And finally, we're going to put it all back together and ask the big one, why should any of this matter to you and me today? So let's start at the beginning. Part 1, the romantic search for truth. This is the moment where that thread we were talking about, the one connecting beauty, truth, and reality, is first woven together, nice and strong. The core belief for the Romantics really was that the world wasn't just a random pile of stuff. No, it held a deeper meaning, some kind of universal truth. And the whole job of the artist, of the poet, was to tap into that truth, through nature, through big emotions, through art, and then use language to express it in a way we could all feel. Language was the perfect bridge, a direct line to reality. And you can totally see this in action in the works of poets like Keats and Roca. In Ode to a Nightingale, Keats hears this bird song and uses it to imagine escaping all of human suffering and touching something eternal. Roca does something similar in his sonnets to Orpheus. He pictures the poet as this kind of bridge between the living and the dead, bringing back truths through his art. For both of them, the goal was exactly the same: connect our messy human world to a deeper, more real one. Okay, so that's the beautiful, tidy picture, but it didn't last. In our second section, we hit the very first problem. Is language really a bridge, or could it be more like a cage? This is where our perfect thread hits its first real snag. Even before the big-shot philosophers got their hands on this, poets themselves were starting to feel like language wasn't this perfect tool. The work of a guy like the Austrian poet George Trakl is a perfect example. His poems are just filled with these broken images, weird colors, this feeling of decay. It's almost like he's trying to talk about a truth so dark or so complicated that our normal, everyday language just shatters when it tries to hold it. And that leads us straight to section 3. So if the poets just found a little snag, the philosopher Jacques Derrida, well, he comes along and gives that thread a firm, decisive pull. Now, to get what Derrida was doing, you first have to understand the idea he was trying to tear down. He called it logocentrism. It's basically that whole Keats idea, just in philosopher speak. It's the belief that at the very center of everything, our language, our thoughts, there is a stable, fixed truth, a logos, and our words are just neat little labels that point directly to it. Derrida's absolutely explosive idea, which you can find in books like Of Grammatology, was to look at all of that and say, nope, you've got it completely backwards. He famously said, there is nothing outside the text. Now, what he meant by that is that words don't get their meaning by pointing to some thing out there in the real world. Nope, they get their meaning from their relationship to all the other words. So how does this work? Well, it's two things. First, meaning comes from difference. The word day, for example, doesn't have some special dayness inside it. We only know what day means because it's not night, and it's not dusk. And second, meaning is always deferred or pushed off. To define day, you have to use other words. To define those words, you need even more words, and it goes on forever in an endless chain. And the result? Full, stable meaning is always just out of reach. It's never really there. Derrida came up with a clever name for this constant state of difference and delay: difference. So if Derrida shows us that meaning is super unstable, our next thinker, Michel Foucault, comes in with an even sharper question. Who gets to decide what things mean in the first place? In section 4, Foucault basically reweaves the whole pattern to show us power's hidden blueprint. In his amazing book, Discipline and Punish, Foucault points out this huge shift in how power works. Back in the day, you had sovereign power. Think of a king ordering a public execution. It's a big, violent public show, and it's all about punishing the body. But Foucault says modern society came up with a new, much sneakier kind of power, disciplinary power. This power is quiet, it's constant, and it works through places like prisons, schools, hospitals. It's not a big public spectacle. It's about constant surveillance, about training the mind, about shaping the very soul. And here is Foucault's bombshell. This new kind of power doesn't just hold us down. It actually produces us. It creates what we think of as normal or sane or criminal. Think about it. A doctor's diagnosis literally defines what is healthy. School grades define who is smart. For Foucault, these aren't just objective truths floating out there. They're categories of knowledge created by powerful institutions. You literally cannot separate power from knowledge. They're two sides of the same coin. The ability to define what's true is the ultimate form of power. Okay, so Derrida unraveled meaning. Foucault showed us that truth is really a product of power. But our final thinker, Jean Baudrillard, oh man, he went even further. He didn't just pull the thread. He took out a giant pair of scissors and cut it completely. Welcome to the desert of the real. So, Baudrillard, in his masterpiece Simulacra and Simulation, says our connection to reality has broken down in 4 stages. Let's use a map to explain. Stage 1, the image is a good reflection of reality, a perfect map of a real place. Stage 2, the image starts to distort reality. Think of a propaganda map that makes a country look bigger. Stage 3 is the huge leap. The image hides the fact that there's no reality there at all. This is like a map of a fictional place, say from a video game. But the final stage, that's where he says we are now. The image has zero connection to reality. In fact, the map has become more real than any territory it was ever supposed to represent. So, if we're in that 4th stage where the simulation is all that's left, what does that even mean? What do you call a world like that? Baudrillard's term for this is hyper-reality. It's a world where the line between what's real and what's a simulation has totally collapsed. Think about reality TV or perfectly curated Instagram feeds or even Disneyland. We are just swimming in so many signs and images and models of the real that we've completely lost touch with whatever original reality was there to begin with. Okay, wow, that was a pretty wild ride, from romantic poetry to a world with no reality. But this isn't just some abstract philosophical game. So let's bring it all home in our final section and ask, why does any of this unraveling actually matter to us? Right here, right now. So let's do a super quick recap of our journey. We started with the Romantics, right? They believed there was a clear, beautiful path to the truth. Then Derrida came along and showed us that the path itself, language, was totally unstable. Foucault then argued that the path was actually built by these hidden power structures. And finally, Baudrillard claimed the whole destination, reality itself, had vanished, leaving us with nothing but the map. And these ideas, they aren't just for the classroom. They give us an incredibly powerful lens to understand the world we're living in right now. When we're all struggling with fake news and disinformation, we're living in Baudrillard's hyperreality. When we see how social media algorithms create our little filter bubbles, that's Foucault's power/knowledge in action, my friends. Every single time people argue over the true meaning of a law or religious text, we're wrestling with Derrida's différance. And that feeling deep down, that longing for something real and authentic in a world of brands and copies, that's the ghost of that old romantic ideal still haunting all of us. And all of that leaves us with one final, really crucial question. These thinkers, they took apart all our old certainties. They left us in a world where truth, meaning, and reality are all pretty much up for grabs. So the real challenge for us, living in this totally unraveled tapestry, is to figure out, how do we weave it back together for ourselves? What tools are we going to use to decide what is real, what is true, and ultimately what really truly matters?